definitely have a exciting presentation for you guys today. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. First thing I want to remind everybody that if you're not speaking, we do want to keep ourselves on mute. There are some opportunities throughout for you to ask questions. And so there will be some opportunity to come off of mute, but if you are not the one talking, we ask that you put yourself back on mute. The other thing is I want to say a special thank you to AOC Community Media for streaming this. This is being streamed live and then also recorded so you can go back and watch it later. And so special thank you to them for continuing to provide that service for our presentations each month. Today we have just a quick update from ARCH as it relates to some of the homelessness and housing related initiatives going on across Acadiana, and then we'll hear a special presentation from some representatives of Faith House related to what many are calling a shadow pandemic of domestic violence that has been occurring in our communities. Also, go ahead and push to the next slide for me if you don't mind. Yeah, thanks. So by way of quick update, I know those of you who have been joining these meetings for a while have been paying attention to the sheltering that has been provided. We started offering shelter way back in March of 2020 in response to the COVID pandemic so that those who had no home would have a safe place to isolate or quarantine. And at the peak, there were about 800 households served through that program. And so this is just showing as of yesterday, there's about 110 households remaining in that COVID non-congregate sheltering program. We've been able to help many of the households that were in that program identify other housing solutions, but about 130 households are now in what's called rapid rehousing programming with some supportive services from case management to help them maintain that housing. A huge thank you to St. Bernadette Clinic for helping us to get some vaccinations to those that are still in the hotel program. Really critical for us to be able to help that population access vaccines for their health and safety as well as public health safety. I also wanted to provide a quick update. We received updates from both the Lafayette Rental Assistance Emergency Assistance Program called LEAP, and also from the state's rental assistance program. This is the Treasury Rent Assistance Program that many of you guys have heard of, that's able to help households with up to 12 months of arrears for their rent, working directly to support the landlords in that, as well as the tenants stabilizing and housing. And they can also provide up to 3 months of forward rent for those who are still in need of that kind of stabilization. So it's the rent assistance program that we've been waiting for. The state program has been up and running about 6 weeks now, and the chart at the bottom are the numbers from them. So you can see we're at about $5-6 million worth of assistance in our region, which is the Acadiana region, excluding Lafayette. So all of the parishes except Lafayette in the 8 parish region of Acadiana are covered in that chart. That's the report that we received from them yesterday. And then also on the 19th, LCG was able to report this was only 1 week of assistance. The program had only been operational for 1 week when this report went through, but there was over 1,200 applications started, and about 500 of them had been actually submitted, 26 approved, with funding disbursement at that point of only about 11,000. But again, it was early on in the program. My understanding from those administering is that that number has significantly risen just in the last few days as they've processed through a number of that 26 that were approved. So we're seeing finally dollars hit the ground to be able to help stabilize tenants and their landlords who have been waiting for this assistance. So this is really great news to begin to see that in our area. Go ahead, next slide. And just a couple of other updates I wanted to make sure that you all were aware of. There is a community-wide conversation happening right now related to long-term shelter solutions. You know, if you've joined these calls in the past, that we have sustained a significant loss to the number of shelter beds we have in our region. It looks like we'll be down about 150 shelter beds when all is said and done, and that's a permanent loss in this community across our region. So we have to find a solution that's going to help replace at least some of those shelter beds on a long-term range, not just short-term. The non-congregate sheltering through the hotels have been a short-term solution. That's winding down, and we need a permanent solution. So there is a conversation happening amongst homeless service providers. If you're not part of that conversation and you want to be, please reach out to me so we can get you plugged in there. That group is meeting every other Wednesday at 9 a.m. Also, just to be aware, the Lafayette Housing Authority does have public meetings. Right now, their schedule is every fourth Wednesday at 10 o'clock. They meet on site at the Lafayette Housing Authority office over on KD Street. And again, if you want more information about that, certainly touch base with me. I'll happily get you that information. And the Housing Alliance, the Acadiana Housing Alliance, which we have joint meetings with on the fourth Thursday every other month, has some subcommittees that have started up again, one related to data as it relates to housing, and another related to how we might be able to keep tabs on what homeowner assistance is available and where the gaps in services there, and so maybe some strategic plans around that, as well as housing counseling, what's available, where are the gaps, and how we could address that across the region. So some exciting things happening there. And if you'd like to plug into any of those, reach out and we can get you connected. On the national level, advocates at the national level, National Low Income Housing Coalition has launched a campaign to try to get the universal housing voucher program up and running. For many of the programs, for example, food stamps, if you are eligible for the program, you receive that resource. That's not the way that we typically do housing assistance programs. There's always been limits and caps on how many can be provided. So just because you're eligible doesn't necessarily mean that you will receive that assistance for housing. A universal housing voucher program would operate more like the way we do food stamps, whereas if you would be eligible for that type of assistance, then you could receive that type of assistance. And housing vouchers, the best way that they're known typically is through the Section 8 program. So it would be amazing if we had enough housing choice vouchers or Section 8 vouchers for everyone who is eligible for them to receive them. That would go a long way towards ending homelessness and stabilizing housing for those who are struggling to stabilize into housing. And so the specific ask at this point at the national level is $28 billion, which would provide 5 years worth of funding for about 500,000 housing choice vouchers. So there's just something to keep an eye on for those of you who pay it at the national level. And now, without any further ado, I would like to turn the presentation over to representatives of Faith House. Faith House, as many of you know, is a crisis center and shelter for those who are experiencing or survivors of domestic violence. And they have both residential and non-residential services to assist. They've been very active throughout the COVID pandemic and have some exciting plans for the future that they're going to share with us as well. And so I would like to turn the floor over to them at this time.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Gilcrease. I work with the Faith House of Acadiana. Me, myself, Crystal, and Billy will be presenting today. I'm going to go first. I want to speak a little bit this afternoon about what domestic violence is, how we work with survivors of domestic violence, some options that they might have, connecting them to services, and then also some VAWA tenant rights. Elsa, can you put up the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna have an overview of domestic violence. We're gonna talk about working with victims, options and resources they have, connecting them to the Faith House and other program staff, and also some of their tenant rights. Okay, an overview. And before we get started, I just want to say some of this information can be a little overwhelming at times. So if you feel like you have to turn off your video, walk away, that's totally fine. It's being recorded. You can come back and get whatever information you missed. And then secondly, when I speak about abusive persons and survivors of domestic violence, I'll often refer to the abusive persons as he, the survivors as she, because the majority of cases, that's the dynamic in about 85% of domestic violence cases. So what is domestic violence? Domestic violence is a pattern of coercive control that one person exercises over another. So sometimes we might believe that it is an uncontrollable behavior, maybe a person that suffers with anger management problems, but in fact, it is not those things. An abusive person exercises control over who they abuse, over where the abuse occurs, over who witnesses the abuse, and over the severity and frequency of the abuse. Domestic violence forces survivors to make choices based on how their partner is going to react and how they're going to harm them physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Batterers use violence and they use threats of violence to enforce the control that they have established over another person's life. Some examples of physical violence: using weapons, threatening with weapons, slapping, hitting, chasing them around the house or around the yard, abusing animals, burning things, sexual abuse, punching walls or doors to scare the survivor, stalking, pushing, grabbing, restraining a person from leaving the residence, breaking objects, choking, pulling your hair, driving recklessly, and then threatening with weapons. Some examples of emotional abuse are isolating your partner, not allowing them to have other friendships, other relationships, oftentimes cutting them off from their families and their friends. Keeping your partner from sleeping, depriving them of sleep, threatening the children, humiliating them and embarrassing them, controlling and monitoring their lives, their whereabouts, monitoring their phones, threatening them, making their partner do illegal things, ruining your partner's credit, and then controlling their work status, allowing them or not allowing them to work. And then some statistics. So in the United States, about every 9 seconds, a woman is battered. And that's a lot. About 50% of the women who are experiencing homelessness are experiencing homelessness because they were fleeing domestic violence. It is the leading cause of injury in women between ages 15 and 44 in the US. And of those statistics, only about 13% of survivors will get help from a domestic violence organization. So how does this happen? How do people get trapped in the cycle of abuse? Oftentimes in the beginning, a partner is charming and seems like a dream come true. And the controlling behavior that they express is done so and disguised as love. I want to know where you're at all the time because I miss you. I'm worried about you. I want you to dress a certain way because I like the way you look. You know, things like that. And then she gets hit for the first time. Violence occurs for the first time, and it's not normal. Up until this point, her partner has been charming and a dream come true, but then this happens. So it seems like an abnormal, isolated incident. I'm sorry, it won't happen again, things like that. Okay. And then for a while, things are okay. And then the violence continues and it becomes more frequent. And the woman, maybe after the next occurrences of abuse or violence, a woman will leave for a few days to teach him a lesson or regain some a rest or balance. And the lesson seems to work. He knows that I'm going to leave if he keeps doing these things. And so now she has hope that his behavior is going to change. So when we see women or men who are in a domestic violence relationship, sometimes the natural question can be, well, why doesn't she just leave? And this can be sometimes a natural question. But in asking this question to a woman who's experiencing domestic violence, this question can be a very loaded question. Because when we ask her, why do you stay if you're experiencing this abuse? This question implies that number one, leaving will make her safe and that the abuser will just let her go. When statistically speaking, the most dangerous time for a woman when she decides to leave is the moment she leaves up until about 3 months after she's gone. When she leaves, the abusive person, the control that they have over them is threatened, and there'll probably be some retaliation for that. And then it also implies that leaving is an easy decision and an easy process. It is never an easy decision to leave in a domestic violence relationship because you are aware, one, that if you leave, there might be some repercussions. Two, you might have children together, and it's never easy to break up a family. And then it's not an easy process because, again, abusers don't often just let their survivors go. And then it also implies that she never thought about leaving before, or she never tried leaving before. So let's talk about some of the reasons that she does stay. One is some reasons of hope. She loves him, but she hates the behavior. She just wants him to be the person he is with everybody else. If the abuse would only stop, things would get better. She believes that changing her behavior is going to get his behavior to stop. If I just do good, if I do everything he wants, if I do everything right, then his behavior is going to change and he's not going to abuse me anymore. And then he convinces her that he's sorry and the abuse is going to stop. Some common reasons or common ways that an abuser will convince his victim that he's going to stop is he's going to go to counseling. He's going to go to rehab. He's found Jesus and become religious. He wants the family to stay together. It's for the family. So those are some reasons survivors will hold on to hope or will stay because they're holding on to hope. And then there are also other reasons that are based out of fear. So she's afraid he's going to do something serious to her or her children or her family if she leaves, which could possibly happen. She's afraid that no one's going to believe her. She's afraid that she's going to feel like a failure because she couldn't make things work out. And then lastly, she's afraid that she's going to go to hell or is not following God's will for her life, especially if they're a religious household. She might feel like she can't leave because of religious reasons. And then some other reasons. Economic barriers. She might not have access to any money. She might have had her credit ruined. She has no way of standing on her own 2 feet. She doesn't want to put her children through the shelter system. They're already going through something traumatic enough. She's unaware of her options. Like I said, about only 13% of survivors will get help from domestic violence organizations. They just don't know the options are out there. She feels that she's being selfish if she leaves because she has to keep the family unit together. She's reached out for help before and been unsuccessful, so doesn't want to risk it again. Or perhaps her focus is on her day-to-day survival. She doesn't have time to think about a life outside of the life she has because she is too busy trying to survive the one that she's got. So instead of asking a survivor of domestic violence, why does she stay? Then maybe we can ask ourselves, why are we excusing the violence of an abuser? I've heard often, or here and there, I've heard, well, don't hold it against him. You know, he's really a good guy. Well, why are we excusing the violence because he might be a good person outside of that? That doesn't give us the excuse to excuse his violence. Why are we not holding him accountable for the violence? Louisiana has some pretty good domestic violence laws. There are protections for women out there who are experiencing violence. But I believe that there does have to be a lot of community awareness and that people experiencing domestic violence need to know that there are protections out there for them. So, working with survivors of domestic violence, what's our part in all of this? I know a lot of great organizations are represented here in the ARCH meetings, and sometimes we work with people who are experiencing domestic violence. So I want to talk a little bit about, like, what's your part in this? What can you do to help them? So first, encountering survivors. If you believe or if you suspect that someone is a victim, make sure that you speak with them alone, away from sight and sound of everyone else, of anyone else. They may not disclose to you details or information if they feel like anyone else can be listening. Ask them directly if someone's hurting them or if they are scared of being hurt by someone. And then relay your concerns in a gentle and non-judgmental manner. So if you are concerned for their safety, be open and honest and let them know, I'm concerned for your safety, while at the same time respecting their ability to make their own decisions. So if you want help, if you want to speak to somebody, I'm here to help you. And then let them know how you can help. It might be something within your job scope, or it might be just simply connecting them to a domestic violence organization. So when speaking with or when encountering a survivor of domestic violence, there are some lethality indicators. At our organization, we do an assessment to see how much danger a survivor potentially can be in. And some of the lethality indicators are these. So use of weapons, increase in severity and change of pattern of the abuse. If it's getting more severe, it's getting closer together. Stalking, extreme jealousy or violent jealousy, and strangulation. So if you are working with a survivor and you feel like they need to reach out to a domestic violence organization, then encourage them to do so. So anyone experiencing domestic violence can reach out to our organization. It doesn't matter if they want to leave the relationship or if they want to stay in the relationship. It doesn't matter the level of abuse or if you feel like if they would be a good fit or if you feel like they're abused enough. Any person experiencing abuse can be referred to our organization. So encourage them to do so. We can provide them with resources. We can safety plan with them. We can help them to find a safe place to stay if they're in immediate danger and need to leave. They'll have someone to talk to who's not going to share their story with anybody else. And then there is help for their children. We do provide advocacy for children experiencing domestic violence as well. And encourage them to educate themselves about what domestic violence is. A lot of people don't even know that they're being abused, and they might think that it's normal when it's not. And then finally, let them know that you believe they're capable of making the best choice for themselves. So, something to keep in mind when working with survivors is to understand that you might be the only person that they disclose this to. So in understanding that, respect their confidentiality. Don't speak about it with anyone else unless you're referring them to a domestic violence organization. Believe and validate their experiences. You know, reiterate or reassure them they don't deserve this. It's not their fault, and reassure them that you believe everything they're saying. Acknowledge the injustice, respect their autonomy, their right to make their own decisions, help plan for future safety, which is very important, and then promote access to community resources. And lastly, highlight their strengths. So experiencing a domestic violence relationship is a very difficult experience. They have made it through a very difficult experience. And it takes a lot of strength to make it through that. So look at her strengths in surviving that experience and help her recognize the way she's protected herself and her children. Some things that we should not do. One is to be judgmental. Their decision is their decision, and we need to respect that, whatever decisions they make. We shouldn't make "if I were you" statements or take control. They are coming out of a place or are still in a place where their entire lives are being controlled. And we should be empowering them to make their own decisions and their own choices, allowing them to gain back some of that control over their own lives that they have lost. And don't talk bad about the abuser. Chances are she doesn't hate the abuser, she just wants the abuse to stop. And then don't story top. So if you've heard a bigger and badder abuse story, probably don't share that with her because that can be very inconsiderate, because we want to validate their experience, not belittle it. So safety planning. So we are working with survivors of domestic violence. The key component in working with them is planning for their safety. So what is a safety plan? A safety plan is personalized, practical plan that includes ways to remain safe while you're in the relationship, if you're planning to leave, and after you leave. A lot of survivors, most survivors, will have some kind of safety plan in place. We can just help them kind of formalize it and build on it. So in safety planning with a survivor, you can ask these questions. You can ask, is she scared of him? Are you scared of him? What do you think he will do? What has he done in the past? How has he reacted? And what did you do to help you feel safe or stay safe in those times? And then let the survivor kind of lead on their safety plan and just ask them questions as they go and trust their choices. They're an expert on their batterer, and they know what's going to cause an explosive and potentially dangerous incident. If you want, there is a website at the bottom of the slide if you want to jot it down, and you can visit it with whatever survivors you're working with, or you can give them the information to look up themselves if they feel safe doing that. And then revisit safety at every visit, and always build on their plan and adjust when needed. So options and resources. Some options for survivors are one is they can call the police in an emergency. If there is an emergency and they feel like their life is in danger, they can call the police. Seek protection through civil court, protective orders. That can be a part of her safety plan. Identify which friends, family members, or community members can help and in what specific ways they can help. And then identifying any other resources you believe would help in her specific situation. A little bit about protective orders. One of the options that a survivor has is to obtain a protective order or file for a protective order. They can file at the clerk of court's office in the parish courthouse. It does not cost to file. And if it is granted, the court costs will be cast upon the abusive person or the defendant. So it should be of no cost. You may also request temporary custody, child support, temporary use of community property. That's if you're living together and you would like them to be removed from the property, and spousal support. And then you're going to be given a date within 2 weeks if your protective order is granted or if your temporary restraining order is granted. And then if issued at your court date, it will be granted for a fixed period of time up to 18 months. So they do have this option. And we can help them to file if they want to come meet with an advocate. We can help them with the administrative part of filing and then walk with them over to the courthouse to file and also go to court with them. And then, so then let's talk about VAWA, tenant rights. So VAWA is the Violence Against Women Act. It's a comprehensive federal law that provides protection to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault and stalking, regardless of their gender, even though it's the Violence Against Women Act. There are some housing protections that are included in that. One is that they cannot be denied housing based on past abuse. Anyone in need of emergency assistance can contact the police without penalty. So if your landlord maybe likes you to would like you to keep it quiet at your house and not call the police, he can't do that. And he cannot evict you because you have called the police, no matter how many times you've called. Survivors cannot be evicted because of the violence of their abuser. They can also terminate a lease and move early if they need to. And sometimes they're going to need some paperwork stating that they are a victim of domestic violence. Sometimes they might need to bring the laws with them to their landlord. We can provide them with all that information and that documentation. And then leases can be split so that if an abusive person and their victim is on the lease together, that lease can be split and the abusive party can be evicted. So for getting protections under VAWA, you must request the protections. You have to prove that you are a survivor of domestic violence. Again, we can help you with that over here at our organization. The survivor must be able to meet all other guidelines in the lease agreement. So other than the being free from the abuse, they have to meet all other guidelines of the lease agreement. Call your local DV program, and then the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center. If you need more information, their number is right there at the bottom. Okay, so some domestic violence programs. In Arches region, there's two. So Faith House, we cover Lafayette, Acadia, Vermilion, St. Landry, Rapides, Avoyelles, Evangeline. We have a shelter in Lafayette. We have an office in Abbeville. We have the Family Justice Center of Acadiana, which Chris was going to talk more about in a second. And then they have Shea Hope also, who covers St. Mary, Iberia, and St. Martin parishes. They do have a shelter, and they have office in New Iberia and St. Martinville. And then connecting to Faith House. So how do you connect someone to our services? You meet someone who's being abused and you need to get them in touch with us. We do need to speak with them directly in order to provide services. So either you can call with them and just, you can hand them the phone and we can speak with them. Or you can have them call on their own, whatever they're comfortable with. The crisis line is 1-888-411-1333. That's our crisis line. We'll assess for safety concerns, we'll safety plan with them, and we'll help them identify their options, encourage them to make their own decision. And then services offered. We have our emergency shelter. We do safety planning and lethality assessments, evidence collection, even if they might not want to leave at this time, or they do leave and they need to make sure that the evidence they have stays safe. We can collect that and hold that for them. Assistance with criminal charges support group, advocacy and support for children. They can speak with a police officer and file a report with us. They can file for a protective order and get connected with some civil legal assistance. And then one of the programs that we have at the Faith House that's fairly new, it's about 1.5 years old, is the mobile advocacy support. So if you meet with a survivor at your organization and they need to meet with someone over there, we have what we call the mobile advocates who are available to go to any agency in our parishes and meet with survivors. That's 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. You can just call the crisis line or the shelter line to get in touch with us. We provide on-scene response with law enforcement, hospital response. We provide domestic violence education, legal assistance, which filing for TROs, and then can help them get connected with some civil legal assistance for divorce and custody, advocacy, referral, safety planning, emotional support, shelter, assistance with relocation, and we also do coordinated entry assessments with our homeless population. And that is it for my information. I know that was a whole lot of information. So if anybody has any questions, I could answer them at this time. All right, no questions. I don't see anybody. Well, then I will pass the mic on to Crystal to talk about the Family Justice Center.
Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Scrantz with Faith House as well. So I just wanted to tell you all a little bit about the Family Justice Center of Acadiana. A lot of people get confused. They don't know if we're a separate organization from Faith House or, what the deal is with it. So just to let everyone know, the Family Justice Center is a program of Faith House. So Faith House runs it. Our staff are here. And if you think of the Family Justice Center model, it's similar to the model of a shopping mall. So the mall has, the overall owner, and then there are multiple stores inside of the mall. So the Family Justice Center model is a mall for survivors of domestic violence. So this model, it provides a multidisciplinary team of people working together in one building to effectively respond to domestic violence. So the concept is that one agency or one program cannot effectively respond to domestic violence. This is too complex of a crime and a situation for one perspective to be able to handle it. And so if we're all working together, if we bring all of the resources in our community together to work in a comprehensive way, that's how we really make an impact on domestic violence homicides, domestic violence recidivism in our communities. So in addition to the effectiveness, it's easier for victims as well. So if you think about the options that Sarah was talking about earlier for a person experiencing domestic violence, if someone wants to receive advocacy services, file a protective order, and interact with the police for criminal charges, that's a lot of different agencies, a lot of different places that they have to go, a lot of systems that people have to navigate already in a time whenever they're experiencing great trauma and turmoil. So the Family Justice Center brings all of these people together and says, okay, survivor, you come here and we're going to bring everyone to you instead of you having to go everywhere and figure these things out. So we're all working together in one place for the survivors. So on the screen, you see all of our partner agencies. 9 of the agencies on this list are on-site partners. So they meet with survivors here at the Justice Center. The last 3 on the list are off-site partners. So basically, these are people that are working on the offender side. So they're working with us on offender accountability issues and projects. So they're not here on site because we don't have offenders that come here, but they work with us, particularly with our high-risk population, because we do identify people who are at high risk of homicide, and then we put some extra steps in there to help hold offenders more accountable. Okay, go ahead. So we have Faith House advocates here. So most of you probably know this, but our Faith House's shelter is frequently full, right? We don't have openings in our shelter very often. We have way more of a demand for shelter than we can handle. And so when people need shelter and we don't have space for them, we can help them with the non-residential services. That all happens at the Family Justice Center. So all of those options, option-based advocacy, safety planning, helping with protective orders, support groups, all of those things happen at our Family Justice Center for people who are not living in our shelter. In addition, we do have our attorney that's housed here. So we do have an attorney that represents survivors in court. That is our second most requested service besides shelter. And so again, we don't have enough attorneys to meet the need, but we do help a large percentage of people who come in. At this point, within our own staff attorney and our partner agencies, pretty much everyone we assist with protective orders can have free attorney representation for that portion of their journey. We do have limited attorney representation for divorce and custody after that protective order is in place. And then in addition to all of these things, we also have our law enforcement on site. So people can come in and just talk to an officer. A lot of times we have survivors who police respond on scene, but they don't remember things. They're in trauma mode. Maybe they go to the hospital after, and so they need to bring their medical records later as supplemental evidence. All of those things can happen at the Justice Center. There's also a statewide program called the Address Confidentiality Program, which helps survivors to keep their locations more confidential. We are an application assistance site, so we can help people who are eligible with that program. We do pictures and injury documentation, and we'll save that for survivors in case they do want to move forward with protective orders or criminal charges in the future. We can find out where their criminal case is, who's the prosecutor that's handling it, when's the next court date for their abuser. We can give all of that information to survivors. They can sign up for supervised visitation and also apply for crime victim reparations through some of our partner agencies on site. And so we also have services for children that are exposed to domestic violence. And so we do advocacy and support with children as well. Our one-on-one support with children really focuses on resilience building and building pathways to hope, because all of the research shows that children who've experienced trauma, those who come out on the other side in a successful manner are those who have high resilience and high hope. So our services for children is we use that evidence and build our services around that. We do safety planning and court accompaniment with children as well when they have to go to court to testify in matters. We do support groups for them as well. And then we're also starting a camp and mentoring program for children who are exposed to domestic violence. So that's something really exciting kind of on the horizon. And if any of you are interested in possibly being mentors through this program, then get with me later, shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to talk to you more about that. So also at the Justice Center here, we have food, drinks, we have a very trauma-informed space. We have on-site childcare. So people can leave their children in the playroom while they're talking to law enforcement, while they're meeting with an advocate. Their children don't have to hear any of that. And then we do have all of the equipment to take pictures and print pictures and get what they need for the evidence again. So all of our services here are free, confidential, and voluntary. So even our partner agencies have all agreed, even if they do charge fees for some services, they've all agreed to not charge fees to people who come here. So everything is free. Our services are empowerment-based and trauma-informed. And we are under the Faith House umbrella, so we're prohibited from releasing information regarding people receiving services by federal and state law. So just to let you all know that That's the same whether you're calling about shelter or the Family Justice Center. We're not allowed to release information about people who have received our services. But any victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, stalking, or elder abuse are eligible for services here through at least one of our partner agencies. Some of our partner agencies have different jurisdiction levels, but most have at least jurisdiction through Lafayette. We do prefer to make appointments because we do have times whenever all of our advocates are with people. And so we don't want people to come for services and have to wait for long periods of time before someone can get with them. But we do accept walk-ins, especially if it's an emergency situation. Just have somebody come on over. We'll get them in here and they'll be safe until they can get with someone who can assist them. So our, one more thing to say, or just I'll put our address. Our address is not confidential. It's 718 South Buchanan. So you can, again, just send people here if they need assistance. All right, thank you.
Great, thanks Crystal and Sarah for providing that information. As Crystal mentioned, one of the number one service requested by survivors in our program is for shelter, emergency shelter. We certainly have seen, as Lee mentioned, a declining availability of shelter beds in our community. And for survivors of domestic violence, that can make for a very serious situation where they could be harmed or even killed if they're not able to leave the offender whenever the need arises. So throughout the past 5 years, our board of directors and some of our volunteers have been strategizing on how do we address the increasing needs, how do we better serve survivors that are in our facilities and really meet their safety needs as well as their emotional and security needs while in our facility. So we decided that we're going to build a new facility. And in this location, we feel that we will better serve the needs of those that are being affected by domestic violence in our community. So with this new facility, we will be able to address, we're going to more than double the capacity that we currently have in our current facility. We will better address the imminent danger of abusive situations. We will be able to have more trauma-informed spaces for survivors, meaning that the outdated version of shelters where there are communal living spaces and areas where everyone's just sort of housed together or crammed into rooms together. It's just not a good model for survivors of abuse who are escaping from those homes. With a more trauma-informed space where in our design, the survivors will have their very own apartments, their own kitchens, their own bathrooms, their own living areas and bedrooms for themselves and their children, will provide for a much better sense of well-being within the facility that we're planning to build. We are going to increase, we have great security at our current facility, but we're going to increase it even more in our new design. So, the current facility serviced very well over the past 23 years, but things have changed since then. There are new technologies and new design models for domestic violence programs. So we're going to implement that in our new facility and create an even better and safer place for survivors to be in our community. We are launching our 2-year fundraising campaign. It's hot off the press. We're getting started now, and we have some fantastic momentum in our initial phases of fundraising for this project. So you'll start to see information about what we're doing in the community. And then also, we're hoping that it takes us only 2 years to raise the funds needed for this new building. So I would love to show you all a floor plan of the facility, but due to safety and security, we're not publicly sharing that information. But if you are interested in learning more about it or having more details on the project, I'll be happy to meet with anyone. We had a fantastic architect donated services to our organization to design the building for us, and I could not be happier with the way it turned out. So in our new building, we will have 19 family apartments, and we have a mixture of sizes in the apartments that were designed because we often see families with 6 or more children in the family, and that can be a little difficult to manage, certainly in our current facility. So some of the apartments are for large families and others are for more moderately sized. But also within this new design, we've separated the single people from the families so that they could have a little more privacy and maybe not be as disturbed, for singles, not be as disturbed by children running around all hours of the night. So we'll have 10 single apartments. We'll have offices to provide services on site for our survivors. We are going to have a climate-controlled pet area in this new facility. Many of you know our current facility, we do have 3 pet kennels that are often used with our survivors bringing their dogs, cats, or snakes, lizards, all sorts of things we get at our facility. Here we are designing more pet kennel spaces and for it to be in a climate controlled area. So we're super excited about that. We're going to have a larger playroom and training room to provide group services, classes, all the things that our survivors like to have in-house so that they can receive those while they are working on their safety issues. We'll have a general store on site where they can shop for free for all of the needs that they'll have while they're staying in our facility, and have it really feel like their own space and give them the dignity and autonomy that they really need while they're staying with us. And then, of course, we'll have our laundry and laundry facilities and a healthcare center on site to address the needs that they have while staying with us. Many of our survivors do not feel safe enough to go to the hospital sometimes. So we do have to address, various injuries and that sort of thing while they're with us. So we will be working diligently on getting this project off the ground, seeing it built. Our community needs it. You all are very aware of the issues with getting a place for someone to stay 24 hours a day when they're having that crisis in the middle of the night. And Faith House we are going to work really hard to make this a reality so that we are able to help those individuals when they need it. And, that's the mission that we have. And so please let us know if you would like additional information. We're happy to share this project with you and have some great announcements that'll be coming fairly soon about the project. As far as for referrals, we've mentioned our crisis line. I know that you can go to our website. All of this is listed there. So faithhouseofacadiana.com. I'm sure Lee and Elsa will also share this information if you need it. Make sure to reach out to us if you have any questions or you'd like brochures or additional information to share with individuals that access your programs for services. We're here and we're happy to help as we are needed to. Let's see. Does anyone have any follow-up questions?
I'm going to jump in. We're right at 1 o'clock here, and so we will need to move towards wrapping up so that we can honor this time slot. But that has been so much great information, and I'm really grateful to all three of you, Sarah, Crystal, Billy, thanks so much for sharing all of that with us. We will, of course, like usual, send out the link to the recording and be able to get the contact information out to folks. If they have follow-up questions, they can reach out directly. Just a couple of dates to get on your calendars before we leave. Solar Giving Day is coming up in this next month, and many of the organizations in our coalition are registered for that fundraising event. So on the 6th of May, Arch has been conducting a series of live conversations. Our last one was on eviction. So if you didn't see it, you can go back on our Facebook page. The next one's coming up on the 12th of May. And then our next fourth Thursday at noon meeting will be a joint meeting with the Acadiana Housing Alliance, and that's on the 27th. So I really want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks so much.